Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Bartholomew Bland, the Executive Director of the Lehman College Art Gallery, and I'm very pleased to be joined today by Maureen McCabe, who is one of the artists in the exhibition that's currently online at Lehman College Art Gallery, entitled Sound Vision: Harmonious Relationships in Art and Music. And Maureen is represented by three works in the exhibition, three collage pieces. It Takes Two to Tango, oui-ji, and Pennies from Heaven, which you've just been looking at during the intro to this video. So thank you, Maureen. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's a real pleasure. I love collage. It's one of my favorite mediums. And so your work has appealed to me. I think it's colorful, evocative, quite moving at times. And so we were lucky that you had works that related directly to music, and we'll get into that a little bit. But as you know, Lehman College is a teaching institution, and we're very interested in the early lives of a lot of the artists that we interview and have at the gallery, and sort of what their formative years were like and how they became artists. So we'll start with your childhood. I know you were raised in an Irish family outside in Massachusetts, outside of Boston. Is that right?
Wollaston.
Wollaston,
right beside Quincy, home of two presidents, which I was told from an early age.
Very proud of that. Yes, very proud of that. And one of the things I read in your background materials was that you had a very interesting arts experience, that you actually were designing rosary beads as a child. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I wasn't exactly designing rosary beads. Being brought up Catholic, you went to Sunday school, and there was a contest. And the contest, this is like when I'm like 7 years old, 8 years old, was that you got a large piece of paper and the rosary was printed out onto it, just round circles for each one of the mysteries and the cross part. And what you were asked to do was you were to draw a little picture or whatever you wanted in each one of the beads. And so, but in order to do that, you had to pray the entire rosary. So this was a big project. It's probably one of my biggest art projects ever. So each night or day, because there was a lot of beads, I mean, there's over 50 beads, I would pray the entire rosary, then draw in the little cup beads and stuff. So then about a month later, because this took a long time, I was little. Mm-hmm. And so you go, and the winner of the rosary bead contest was going to be announced. So I was there, and the priest got up and said, the winner is Maureen McCabe. I was so excited. Then will she please come up to the altar and receive her, I think I got a Virgin Mary statue. I let out the cat out of the bag here. And so anyways, 3 Maureen McCabes stand up. 3 Maureen McCabes go to the altar where the priest is. And I'm like, oh my God, they could have won, and I didn't. Or how am I going to know? How am I going to prove that I did that and they didn't do that? And they have my name. This is a terrible situation. Well, anyways, I got up there and it worked out. I did win the contest. But it was a moment that never left me. It's like, okay, somebody can have your name. Kind of appropriate now.
The fear of losing, right?
Like people are being hacked left and right now. So
well, do you remember what happened to the other 2 Maureen McCabes, where they were never heard from again?
Never heard from again. But the other thing is they look different from me too. I remember, there was the classic redhead Irish type person, and then there was kind of a blonder one. And that was another thing is, I'm the dark side of the Irish thing, and this is the side I know, which is quite different from, as my sister-in-law would say, you don't come from the Emmett side. there's a whole bunch of Catholic stuff over there. Those are the true Irish. You aren't. So there's
so that you were very conscious of that early on.
yeah.
Now, it sounds like you grew up in a fairly religious family, Irish Catholic. One of the questions we often ask is about the first thing you remember as sort of an emotional response to art. I'm wondering if it's church related.
Well, when I was there, I thought everything was a miracle because it was all done in Latin, you know? So, you know, when the little host appeared, I thought it was real. Yeah, real. And then the one thing I will say, though, is Catholicism is a little dangerous, especially if you're female. And my mom was great because my parents were older. My dad was born in 1904 and my mom was born in 1910. So they had gone through a lot of stuff. I mean, like the Depression, and my mother had seen her girlfriends being physically abused, her girlfriends getting pregnant, and men, you know, the men disappearing. I mean, I had 2 alcoholic grandfathers that I never met. And I should have, but never did. And so when all the Catholic stuff was told to you, I would say, you don't, Mom, what do you think about that? And she said, this was great. That doesn't apply to us, Maureen. Which meant my mom believed in abortion. I mean, that's a no-no. Totally believed in it because what she saw happen to her girlfriends, you know, where it tells you men's supposed to be rule everything. She said, doesn't apply to us. And so there was, yet she was.
So you could see the sort of conflicts in the doctrine versus the way you were the actual beliefs versus what the
right.
And did that and did sort of the magnificence of the Catholic Church, the artworks, the murals, the statues, I mean, was that your sort of first aesthetic experience?
Well,
or was it coming from a more secular place?
Well, actually, the church that I went to is really a beautiful church. It's in Wollaston, it's St. Anne's, and it's really Art Deco. It's 1920s, and the upper part just had these beautiful gold bands that would go around and then up. And they had really nice statues too. But my, and you know, it's a miraculous religion. And I had visions when I was a little girl too. So, I mean, I saw stuff and things. But I mean, in terms of real visual stuff, I started going to Saturday classes at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. And to get
the museum model was very
it's the museum model. And in those days, the museum, 1, was free. 2, not that many people went, which is a big difference. And there weren't guards everywhere. You could just go. So I kind of, with the museum, I would go to my classes, which were drawing classes, and then you had to come and draw, and you know, nobody went with you. When I think about this now, I mean, I just went everywhere with my pencil things and drawing pads, anywhere.
So you started doing, were you copying at the museum?
We were doing drawings. I was doing drawings of statues. I mean, I was doing all 3-dimensional stuff. You could do paintings and stuff like that, but I did the drawings of all the Baroque statues and the
drapery and folds.
Yeah. And then all the reliquaries were right there as I went up the back stairs to the class. And so the reliquaries, which if people don't know what a reliquary is, it's a bit and pieces of important person, a saint, a little blood, a little tooth, whatever. And the Catholic Church made a lot of money with fake reliquaries too. But so I got that. Basically, that was my first overall experience of seeing all types of arts. I mean, they had amazing American
Encyclopedic
Impressionism.
Museum.
And I mean, you know, they had the Homers, and I mean, they had everything there. When I was 8, I saw this fabulous Rembrandt show. And then I think when I was 12, I saw the Matisse show. You had to pay to go to those shows though. But then after that, I would go to the Gardner Museum with my mom. The Gardner Museum in America is one of the most unique, beautiful museums, because
you really feel the presence of Isabella Stewart Gardner there, don't you?
Well, but the other thing is, it's like you go to Venice immediately. Yeah. And you're not.
In a way, you know, she was kind of a collage artist on the grand scale.
Yes.
Assembling this this artwork that she did, that, you know, her in her will, it was never to be touched. It's those component pieces very much sort of are a living collage. That's
right, which as a director, you know, poses some problems.
Yeah.
You have to be creative.
It's a practical problem.
But the other section, though, I would say about that is the gardens in the middle. I had never seen orchids before. I had never seen hanging nasturtiums before, and anthuriums. And anthuriums are one of my very favorite flowers. And actually, when I got married to Jeffrey, I made a bouquet of anthuriums, which kind of freaked everybody out, but that's another story.
Very, very beautiful. So you were, how often were you going to the museum?
Once a week.
Once a week. So you were doing that through your childhood,
yep.
becoming more proficient at drawing.
Yep.
Did you have an exceptional art teacher in school?
I had two. One was Miss Gilmartin. She was my 5th and 6th grade teacher in elementary school. And it was a school that actually, I don't know if you'd say it was more broadening or whatever, but you know, I did ceramics, copper nailing, but I also,
yes, at that age, I mean.
Yeah, and I also did my first, you know how you have to write like little thesis things, and they teach you how to do that. So I did that in the 6th grade, and I wrote mine on mummification. And
Good.
So, well, because they had mummies at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, I would walk past the mummies. So, and in those days, you used encyclopedias for information. So I had encyclopedias that at school that I looked at in elementary school. And then when I went on to junior high school, I had an incredible teacher, Mrs. Dorch. And there's kind of a subplot here. I mean, I'm in junior high school in 1960. My teacher was African American. She was the only African American in the entire city. But I never thought of her like that because she was my art teacher. And I just found out, you know, years later that no one, you know, she had to live 2 towns over because there were no Black people in Quincy. But my relationship to her.
And what year would have this?
Like 1960. 1960, and let's see, I start to go to RISD in 65. So it's 62. It's like 60.
And did you have what was her name? And did you have a sense?
Her name is Celestine Dorch. And I did keep up with her and everything. And she was a real artist. And she was so nice. But I also have to say, I never saw the other teachers treat her badly or any of the students. Plus, I had art 5 days a week with her. This is like unheard of.
Today, certainly in the educational system, that's a very rare luxury for students to be able to have.
This is a public high school. I mean, we're not, oh no, I mean, actually she is earlier because she's when I'm in junior high school.
So the late 50s.
Yeah, so it's the late 50s, early 60s. And I had her for 3 years.
After you graduated high school, you wanted to go on and pursue an art. I mean, it must have been during high school that you were getting this idea of becoming an artist and what that would entail. do you remember sort of a moment where you thought that this is what you would want to?
Well, I do remember one moment that's kind of, well, there's a couple things. In high school, there was a dreadful art teacher, just dreadful. And I mean, and I just thought, I'm cooked. I'll never get into RISD with this art teacher. And this is my, you know, I'm a sophomore. And the second day of the beginning of the school year, she had a heart attack and died. So they got a young man from Mass College of Art to come and be the art teacher. That changed my life because one, you had a real artist. Two, you had someone that was younger from a real institution. And three, the projects you were given were really good projects. And so through this man, I was able to, and actually I had two of them. They got two of them from Mass Art because one of them couldn't handle it. Well, you know, think about it. You've got the football kids in your art class, and it was so much different for Mrs. George. But anyway, and they helped.
He prepared you during that year, that final year, to enter RISD. And do you remember what you had in your portfolio, the kinds of things?
Well, there's another subplot. There's a couple subplots here that are pretty good if your students are out there. My dad lost his job when I was 16, which meant that all of my, see, in the beginning, I mean, I knew I wanted to be an artist since the second I was born. My mom was just so glad it worked out. But my dad lost his job because he worked at Bethlehem Steel and they sold to General Dynamics, and he was like 59 when this happened. This is terrible. So we went from being middle class to like lower middle class in like 1 week. And my dad decided to retire as opposed to moving to Baltimore, which is the only job, and get a huge demotion. Plus my dad was a great guy. And we talk about him in terms of the music stuff. But I was an angry teenager. And this is a tip, kids. Try not to be too angry, even when you are very unhappy.
Always a good lesson. So you said your mother were your parents encouraging of you doing art?
Oh, yeah. They knew they had a strange one with me. Right from the get-go.
And your father was a musician?
No, my mom was the kindergarten music teacher. And so I actually had been in school before I was born. The only time I've gotten out of school was when I retired from teaching in 2011. And I was
out of college.
Yeah.
Where you are.
But the other thing is, when you asked about the portfolio at RISD, what you had to do was take a drawing test to get in. Mm-hmm. And you take a drawing test with like 250 other kids. I don't test well. I've never tested well. I threw up in the SATs in the room taking it. Mm-hmm. And so my hand froze. I couldn't draw. And so the teachers, they said, you know, more, I mean, I wasn't just into art. I was very good in math and English.
So you had a number of different paths you could have.
I mean, I've always been interested in a lot of different things. I'm not limited to just one direction.
And so overall, how would you were at RISD for 4 years. Yep. What were you specifically focusing on during your period?
Well, RISD in the old days, I just want to say that I had to do the portfolio under the supervision of my high school art teachers. And then I got a full scholarship to RISD. So that was good because I could.
And your parents must have been jubilant that was the.
They were really happy. Sure. Especially my mom. So no, at RISD in foundation art, it's very different now because of technology and everything. but you did drawing, you did orthographic projection drawing, you did sculpture, you did color studies, and it was really a lot more stuff. And then I have always been drawn to the three-dimensional, so I thought that I should be a sculptor. So I became a sculpture major. So I was doing foundry work. We're talking 1965 now. Most women, young people, in 1965, women didn't major in sculpture.
You mentioned you were doing foundry work. Did that have anything to do with your father's background with Bethlehem Steel?
Probably, I saw it, but it's my great grandfathers were stone cutters. And so I come from, I mean, the counties in Ireland that both my grandparents and my grandmother and grandparents are, I mean, they came to Boston and New York. So I'm like, you know, not this fifth gen, you know, I'm pretty close to where I came from.
Yes.
So I took all these different things, but then I know, or I knew, someday you're going to get old, and I'm pretty old now, and I always project forward, and I always have like 2 or 3 backup plans. And it was like, okay, I'm in sculpture. I have to earn a living. There's no money in my house. So sculpture is real expensive. You have to be in a university to do it. And the other thing that started happening was the sculpture that was popular at the time, well, not popular, but it was like figure modeling, things like that. And the assemblage art and that kind of stuff was just kind of starting. Like if you ask me about the artists that I admire, I was a real Louise Nevelson fan. She made a lot of sense to me. Plus, she took things together. She dipped it all in black, put it all together, and I've always been into black too. So I switched to illustration, and because I was a good drawer, and I thought, oh, maybe I can make a living doing illustration design. But then that became like, okay, the only thing you can do here is you're going to have to work for all of these types of people. And so as I said earlier, I'm not a good tester. I am not good under total pressure unless I'm very prepared. And so when I went to interviews with illustration and design work, and my design work was like, they said, no, what you've designed, you can't, like, for example, here's one of my best ones. I designed a whole bunch of little tiny shopping bags with lenticular screens and little jewels like that big with beautiful little handles and stuff like that. I designed those in 1967 when I went to, you go to places that hire people that just said, you can't manufacture this, it's too expensive. No one would buy it, there's no needs. How many little bags do you see out there that are amazing for little pieces of jewelry and stuff like that? And I'm like, it's just hilarious.
You've gotten in on the purse craze early.
Yeah, I mean, I could think these things up, but I mean, and then here's the kicker. You're way too imaginative. You're a pretty.
Always about this guy. Creativity for the market.
Right.
So to go back a little bit, Maureen, you graduated in what year from RISD?
1969.
1969. So obviously a huge amount of societal upheaval, perhaps a moment similar to our own.
Right. Not one of my boyfriends, or not one person in my freshman class, not one, went to Vietnam. They did horrible things to themselves. They starved themselves. They pretended they were gay, or they were gay, which that helped. Or the drugs they took. I mean, I would say a third of my the class that I am from, because I went to my 50th reunion last year. they're dead. And the other thing that was happening that was terrible, but none of the men knew about it, was the entire fashion department, textiles and stuff, had wonderful men in it, and they're all dead from AIDS. And it's like, I don't know,
So you certainly experienced a lot of different historical moments and changes. But after you graduated RISD, did you want to go to New York? Did you?
I knew I had to get a job, so I knew I had to go to graduate school.
You knew you had to go to graduate school, and so where did you decide to go to graduate school?
I went to Cranbrook Academy of Art in Bloomfield Hills, and I went in design. And there was a great industrial design teacher, Harrison was his name, at RISD, who he just said, Maureen, I'll get you into Cranbrook with a scholarship. This is where you have to go. So, and I had applied to Syracuse, and I got into Syracuse, and I actually got a full scholarship to both of the places. But in Syracuse, I had to teach. And as part of the scholarship thing. And he said to me, you don't want to teach if you're going to graduate school.
Graduate school at the same time.
Yeah, and that plus, yeah, but they were
your MFA from Cranbrook in the early 70s, right?
Yeah.
And then how had your work transformed while you were at Cranbrook? Were you moving more into the collage by that point, or?
Yeah, yes, because I had a great teacher, Jack Massey, my last year at RISD, and he actually is a collage artist, and he was our quote painting teacher in illustration, but I was doing these three-dimensional Victorian globes and things like that, and he was very instrumental in helping me. So when I got to Cranbrook, I had all of these little bits and pieces that I had all shipped there. But when I got there, my teacher in design had been fired, but he was still the teacher, which was a problem. So I started hanging out with the painters, the jewelry makers, the print makers, and the sculptors, because I knew about all of those things from my training at RISD, and gobs back. I mean, I went prepared with they don't teach you stuff in graduate school. They critique you to death. And then that was a very changing.
I'm sure our students will empathize the idea of being critiqued. So you finished at Cranbrook. So now it's what, the early to mid 70s? Is that?
At Cranbrook, remember I told you I needed to support myself. So actually at RISD, I had made friends with the job department person there, because I knew I was going to need help. And it became very clear at Cranbrook, they're much more organized. When I was at Cranbrook, it was a very rough period for them. It wasn't the school it is today. It was the grounds, everything. Basically, it was a mess. But in a way, maybe that worked out for me. I had to support myself. So I wrote to Carolyn Hawes at RISD, and I said, I need to be looking for a job, because I worked as a librarian at Cranbrook. And so she came up with a job my second year at Connecticut College. So I had done 1 year of Cranbrook. But the other thing that I did was I knew that I had to produce a lot of art. So I applied to an art colony in Pulpit Rock, Connecticut. It no longer exists. And I asked my mom, and my mom went back to work in a bank. My dad was it was just, and then my dad had a major heart attack. And so I'm like, and my relationship with my father was not great, because, he just saw no way I could support myself in art. And he just said, you could have a real job. And I'm like, I think I can work this out. And he said, no. Anyway, so I went to Pulpit Rock and made a whole bunch of work. Then I went back to Cranbrook And then I got this job offer. At Cranbrook, you have to write a thesis and you have to mount an exhibition. Because I had done that art colony for a month, I had the work.
Right.
And I had the work from the year before. So I went for the job interview, and
Connecticut College.
I went for the job interview in December, Connecticut College, coming back from Cranbrook, and it was a temporary full-time job that would become a full-time job, and I took it. I mean, I had to interview. And
so you started the following September for
No, I started in January.
Wow.
I was the youngest professor ever hired. I mean, I was younger than some of my students.
Well, that was certainly quite the dream, isn't it? Yeah.
Or the nightmare.
Or the nightmare.
Or the nightmare. So anyway, I went back to Cranbrook, mounted the exhibition. You know, I had friends there. I had a boyfriend there. My boyfriend was there, who would come to live with me, and then he moved on to greater and bigger things. And then I got the job. One of the things that is interesting about that job, and that was the time when where the art world was really a really interesting place. I mean, is that like Janet Fish applied for the job. Mm-hmm. I mean, Janet Fish, for you guys out there, pretty famous. And also, so there were a number of actually New York artists, big time ones that applied, but they were not going to move to Connecticut. And they said, my career is I need to be in New York for my career. Plus the job was 5 days a week, and it was really a hard job. I mean, the courses were 2.5 hours.
That's a long time.
And so I would come home for lunch and work in my studio for an hour and then go back and teach. But I was like younger then, a lot younger. So I could stay up till 3 in the morning and do my art. And so that's what I did. And George Ortman, who died a couple of years ago, George Ortman, really pretty well-known artist, big obituary in the New York Times. He had told me, you know, the only gallery for you in New York, Maureen, is Alan Stone. So you should go see Alan Stone. So in 1971, I went and saw Alan Stone. He said, God, this is great stuff. You can have a show. So I had my first solo show in 1972 with Alan Stone. Wonderful. And if anybody doesn't know him, look him up. He was one of the most...
He was an interesting man. He helped me with loans for one of my first shows I was putting together. Wayne Tebow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Did you ever go to his house?
No, I didn't. Although I saw that documentary about...
with his daughter. Yeah. Posey. Yeah. No, I've been to his house. I was at his house many times. Yeah. Alan even gave me... Alan thought he was going to be he really wanted to be a collage artist because he's the one that, one of the first ones that really showed Joseph Cornell. Mm. And Joseph Cornell really loved him. And so when Alan would go to see Joseph Cornell, they would have to sit in separate rooms because Cornell thought that Alan's vibe was too intense.
There you go. There you go. So this whole time you had a long teaching career at Connecticut College. You were making collage most of the time that you were there. Because we're close to the end of our interview, I'd love you to talk a little bit specifically about the 3 pieces that we have in Sound Vision. That would be great. Your collage was developing as time was going on, and these are really from your mature period.
Right. Well, one, the Pennies from Heaven one, that was a popular song in 1936, and that's the height of the Depression. And it's actually Bing Crosby sings it, and it's a message of hope during the Depression, which was a really dire period, which is the same exact thing that's happening right now. Ouija, Ouija, spiritualism and the Ouija board really made a big comeback in the 1920s and stuff. I've always been interested in illusionistic magic and the history of real magic. And my work actually does draw on the history and research of both of those areas.
And that we should say that the poster you're in front of actually comes from a famous magician. So
this is Ionia. It's not a real name. If you want to know about a really cool operator, look up Ionia. She was born in Belgium. She comes from a family of magicians, and she was a great illusionist. And I've done several pieces on Ionia. I've done, and my other, she's my favorite female one. And then my other one is Alexander. And my best exhibition I ever had was at the Bellevue Arts Museum in, I think it was 2006, because I went to Seattle, and that's where they have a market there that has one of the oldest magic shops in the United States. And then I got to learn about Alexander.
So. Wonderful, wonderful. So that was the Pennies from Heaven that you have in the show, and the Ouija, and then the third piece.
Takes Two to Tango. This the song was actually popular in 1952, but the man in it is Rudolph Valentino. And the woman in it is Beatrix Dominique. I'm not going to say her name right. It's Beatrix. And she was, and they're both Latin. And it was a major role for her. But unfortunately for her, after she makes the movie, she dies of the same disease that Rudolph Valentino dies of, which is basically burst appendix. And so if you look at the piece, it's a homage to these two people, because the little hearts around the piece are milagros. And so they're reliquaries. Well, they're not reliquaries. What they are is they're stabbed hearts, and they're used for two purposes. One, if you lose someone you love, then you put it on your favorite statue. But it's also can be used for if you have heart problems too. So
layers upon layers of meaning. That's a nice segue, Maureen. You brought us all the way around to when we were talking about the early Catholicism in your experience, and how bits of that of that iconography have appeared in your work as time has gone by. And what are you working on now? What's your most recent endeavor?
This is pretty interesting what I'm working on right now. I'm going to be in a museum show at the Duxbury Complex Art. It's called Duxbury Art Complex, and it's a small museum, beautiful little museum in Duxbury, Massachusetts, and it's their 50th anniversary. And there are 12 people that have been selected to take one of their an object that hasn't been seen for 50 years and make a piece that resonates with that object. And so I picked a small pot by Maria Martinez. She's a famous New Mexican Black potter. And the piece is just exquisite. And it's Black with symbols that go around it. Her husband's the one that developed and did the symbols on the pot. She made the pot, but the symbols are her husband. The symbols are parallel to Newgrange in Ireland. I worked for 17 years on an Irish series based on the passage graves in Ireland. Those are 5,000 years before Christ. And so the symbols on her pots and the symbol on the stones are the same. So I'm doing a piece that does a compare and contrast between and my work. And I did want to do this too. If they look at my work, this is slate. And the slate, how do I get the images? I use engraving tools. I have tons of engraving tools. You draw, you engrave, that kind of stuff.
That goes back to your grandfather as a stone cutter and everything. Yeah. So again, bringing it full.
And that's what I'm doing with this piece. I've recreated one of the famous stones that creates the circular journey that goes through it. And then, yeah, I mean, when I travel to places that can inform my vision and my arts. So I go to a lot of, basically, I like ancient art the best. There's something that's so powerful for me, standing in ancient sites.
Well, we will look forward to seeing your latest production when it comes forth. And
yeah, they're in the same position though. It might be this way.
Yeah. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. And thank you so much for being in the exhibition. I hope that your personal story will be of interest to our students. And you've certainly had a wonderful career. We look forward to seeing what you're going to do next.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Bart. This has really been fun.
This has been fun. Thanks so much, Maureen.
Yeah. Bye-bye.